I've never been a Broadway guy, but the one show I've always been the most interested in seeing is Wicked, because if you're gonna see one Broadway show, it's probably gotta be the one that's the most hyped of the entire generation. And the only other show that even comes close to the hype in this century is probably Hamilton. And I saw the taping they did of that show on Disney Plus a few years ago, and I thought it was solid. It's not really my thing, but I understand why so many people love it. But when it comes to Wicked, it has a lot of things going for it. The most obvious being that it's this different take on The Wizard of Oz, which is one of those movies that I feel like anybody that grew up with a TV at this point in time, we've all seen it. We have all seen The Wizard of Oz. And the people that haven't seen it have probably seen The Wiz. So it's a story we're all pretty familiar with. And even though I haven't seen the actual show in person, the people that have can't shut up about it. The fans of Wicked love it to death. My girlfriend and her mom being two of those fans who I got to see the movie with. I remember my mom talking about it a ton when she got to see it in New York, probably like 10, 15 years ago at this point. The point is, everybody that has seen the show Wicked has pretty much said, you have to see Wicked before you die. It's the one that everybody talks about. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I'm coming from the perspective of somebody that's a theater expert. I appreciate it and I respect it for what it is. It's just never been my personal kind of thing. And I'm sure if I went to more shows, I'd be a bigger fan of this kind of production. But when you gotta drop like $300 on 2 tickets, it's tough, okay? I'd just much rather spend my money on an Eagles game. But I do these kinds of things for my girlfriend. I experience shows every once in a while, and I get why people do love it. So I went into this movie with a very open mind, but I also went in pretty skeptical as well, because John M. Chu, I don't really love what I've seen from him, which is not much. I have missed a lot of his movies. I never got around to seeing Crazy Rich Asians, which I heard really good things about. I never saw the Justin Bieber Never Say Never concert. When it came out when I was 15, I was just not a Justin Bieber fan. Never really been that type of person. I never saw Now You See Me 2 because I hated Now You See Me 1. So the only thing I've actually seen from him, surprisingly, is In the Heights, which I thought was okay. Like, I get why people really enjoy that movie. I know a lot of people are big fans of the movie and the actual Broadway musical. I thought it was fine. And I'm open to liking musicals. You know, a lot of my favorite movies are musicals. I just need an interesting story, some good musical sequences, some good music in general, and just some passionate filmmaking behind the camera. And while In the Heights never did that for me, I do have to say, I think John M. Chu and his entire filmmaking team really stepped up their game here, because I think Wicked is pretty undeniably good. And my girlfriend was definitely excited for this movie, but that AMC teaser they kept playing before every movie you would see at AMC for the past 2 months, where they show off scenes from Wicked, every time that popped on, she would just like shake her head and look at me and be like, I don't think it's gonna be good. And then the movie comes out and she cries 5 different times. So I would say it's safe to say that her and her mom, who as soon as the credits rolled, she was like, that was amazing, they actually did it. I think it's safe to say that Wicked fans got a movie that they deserve. And coming from somebody that didn't know the Wicked story going into the movie, I think it delivers on what it sets out to do. I get excited for seeing pretty much any movie in a theater, but movies like this, where it feels like an event, I get a little extra excited for. Even if a movie like The Avengers isn't always necessarily my thing, I still get excited for those weekends, because I get excited for pretty much any kind of movie, but I do think there is something special when there's something like an event that is happening in theaters, where the general public pretty much plans their entire weekend around seeing the big movie that's finally coming out. Even if the Avengers movies aren't always necessarily my thing, I still get excited for seeing all these people get super stoked about seeing the brand new movie. The theaters are packed. For something like Wicked, people are dressed up in pink and green and they're super excited to see this. I just love the energy that comes with seeing a movie like this opening weekend in theaters. I think it helps keep movies alive in general, and I think it's important to have movies like this. So anytime I can support that opening weekend, I do get excited. And I'm happy we live in a world where fans of this musical that have been listening to this music for 20 plus years and celebrating this show could go to the theater, be like a fiend like my girlfriend, and get the collectible cut before anybody else can. And they all sit down and they get a pretty good movie. And coming from somebody that only judges performers based off their film and television work, because I don't really know their Broadway work like that, I knew I liked Cynthia Erivo as a performer because I really liked her a lot in Steve McQueen's Widows, Heroes, which came out back in 2018, which I was pretty confident would be like a classic cable thriller at this point, but it seems like nobody has talked about that movie since it came out. I highly recommend it, even though Cynthia does not do any singing in that, but I knew she was definitely a very capable actress, a very talented actress, and I figured if they chose her to lead this production, she was probably a pretty decent singer. But man, she annihilates every track that she's involved in here. Even before the Defying Gravity performance and sequence, which is by far my favorite of the entire movie. It's probably the favorite of everybody that sees the movie. Just from every earlier music sequence, you could just tell that she's singing on a whole other level here. And now I'm not that surprised. I haven't seen her in that many movies since 2018 because she's probably killing it in so many Broadway things. I will say if her singing is a 10 out of 10, I think the rest of her acting in terms of dialogue and things like that is probably like a 7 to 7.5 out of 10. Because look, if you ask me what my favorite part of The Wizard of Oz is, I would have to say it's probably Margaret Hamilton as the Wicked Witch. I know when we often talk about the best villains of all time in cinema history, it's probably easy to kind of forget about her a little bit, but I went back and rewatched The Wizard of Oz in full for the first time in probably like 20 years. I haven't seen it, and she is so good in it. It's absolutely insane. Not only does she destroy the role, I think you could make the argument that she probably set the foundation of what it takes to be not only a good fantasy movie villain, but just a good movie villain in a talking picture. She set the standard for that. There's not many great on-screen talking villains before her time in movie history, and I really think you can make the case it's one of the best performances of all time. And because of that, while I was watching this movie, I know it's a completely different take on The Wizard of Oz. I know it's a completely different take on that story. You're getting a different perspective of the angle of this character, but it's hard for me to still separate this version, the Wicked version of the Witch and Elphaba, to Margaret Hamilton's version still. And I get it, it's a different take. You know, in The Wizard of Oz, I was talking to my girlfriend about this on the drive home from the movie, and I was bringing up this point, and she said, but you know, in The Wizard of Oz, it's not really those characters. Dorothy's kind of imposing the people she met in her real life on those characters, so these are kind of like the real versions of the characters. So I understand that argument, but I also kind of look at it as comparing the different versions of the Joker we have seen, like Jack Nicholson to Heath Ledger and Joaquin Phoenix. All three of those are still the Joker. They're just completely different types of the Joker, and I could still acknowledge that and still say, yeah, but Heath Ledger's Joker is the best Joker. But I don't want that to take away from the fact that Cynthia is really good in this movie. She turned in an amazing performance. There were parts of the movie that I felt like I was going to cringe at, but she does it in a way that I thought really worked emotionally. And even though I wouldn't put her in the best actress conversation at the Oscars this year compared to a lot of the other performances I've seen from women this year, I do think she can pull off something pretty crazy in part two. But I was also pretty skeptical about Ariana Grande coming into this. I thought they were maybe casting her just to get that big name actress attached to the project to build hype around in the marketing. But my girlfriend also informed me that Miss Ariana Grande got her start in musical theater, and this was kind of a passion project from the beginning. She always wanted to be involved in Wicked, and I think that really shows on screen because I was pretty blown away with how good Ariana Grande is in this. I'm still not necessarily sold on her as like a versatile actress. I'm curious to see if she could pull off other kinds of roles, but I do think for the musical talent that she has, the type of voice she already does, and just her comedic timing, I think there is nobody you could have cast better than Ariana Grande here. And I was genuinely surprised at how much she was making me laugh. Like her whole running gag with the flipping of the hair, I saw a little bit of it in that quick AMC teaser, and I was like, okay, like sure, it might be funny. It might make some kids laugh, but the more it happened in the movie, I was genuinely laughing at a lot of timing with it. I just thought she did a really good job. And I do think if either of them is going to get any sort of awards contention, I do think, even though Cynthia probably has not only the better musical numbers, but probably does the better singing in this movie, I think when it comes to every other aspect of acting, in terms of the comedic timing and just dialogue heavy scenes, I think Ariana Grande might have been my favorite of the two. If she got a supporting actress nomination, I would be a tiny bit surprised, but I wouldn't be mad. I do think she's very good here. Another thing I was very skeptical about going into this was doing the whole splitting part one, part two So if you don't know, for whatever reason, you probably already know, but I'm going to repeat it anyway. This is the first act of the play, and I thought that wasn't going to be a great idea until I saw the movie, because I think this works better than a lot of part ones. Like Dune Part 1 and Across the Spider-Verse are recent examples where they're good movies. They're undeniably good movies. I know it's a touchy subject. A lot of people love both of those movies, but I do think the biggest flaw with both of them is there are certain segments of those movies where it feels like they're really drawing out the movie so they can make a part 1 and a part 2. And maybe my mind will change on this when we see Wicked Part 2. Maybe what I felt about Dune 1 and Across the Spider-Verse, I will feel about Wicked Part 2, where a lot of segments of that feel a bit stretched out. And if that's the case, maybe they should have made this one movie. But basing that claim off of what we got so far, in a world where a lot of part 1s feel really stretched out, I thought this movie flew by. This movie is 2 hours and 40 minutes long, and I could not believe that, because I had a rough idea of where the movie would probably end, because my girlfriend was playing the soundtrack for me and kind of explaining the whole play. So where it ends, it naturally makes sense where it would end based off how the play plays out. So when it got to the part where it seemed like we were getting closer to the end, I was like, there's no way. We probably have at least another hour and a half left, but we probably only had like 45 minutes left at that point, because the pacing here really does work a lot. I'm going to make a video about Gladiator 2 as well, which I also saw this weekend, but just to spoil a little bit of my thoughts of that movie, Gladiator 2 was 10 minutes shorter than Wicked Part 1, and Gladiator 2 felt like it was 2 hours longer. That movie felt like it was never going to end, and Wicked just kind of flew by. And I think when a movie is that well paced, I always praise it. And again, to give John M. Chu, the director, a lot of credit here, he did an excellent job, not only in getting the best performances out of these actresses and just singers in general, not only with the pacing of the entire story, but also just the directing of everything, especially the musical sequences here, are so impressive to look at. A lot of them speak for themselves, like Defying Gravity. Everyone's going to talk about online. It's a great scene. It's the best scene in the movie, without question. But there's a lot of other sequences that really stand out as well. Like, I think there's whatever song they perform in the library, that whole thing was so visually impressive to look at. The passion they were putting behind the camera work was super impressive. And I just feel like a lot of movies with this kind of budget, it tends to be a bit lazy in how they film it. And I did not feel that way at all. I thought all the sequences were really impressive. And I could see why this is such an easily rewatchable movie. And the only thing I could honestly think of in terms of a con isn't even fully a con. Like, it's kind of a mixed bag for me, is the way they handle some of the visual effects in this movie. Because there are certain things that look incredible. Like, the costume design speaks for itself. Everything visually in that department looks great. There's a lot of practical effects that really help not only the musical sequences come alive, but just the entire set in general. But the scene that stood out the most for me was when they finally actually meet the wizard, and the way they handled that entire room and the big face they have for the Wizard of Oz. That whole thing looked incredible. And at the same time, they build all of these sets. They have all of these real practical effects that are actually there on set, and they somehow, in certain scenes, make the movie look cheaper than it actually is. At times, it felt very much like this was a Marvel movie in the cinematic universe. And granted, if this was an MCU movie, it would be one of the better looking MCU movies, but I think a lot of that credit goes to The Wizard of Oz just being one of the most visually interesting movies of all time. I mean, it was arguably the first movie in color. Like, you have to praise it for what it did, especially for the time, and even today, like, The Wizard of Oz looks visually incredible. But for Wicked, I wish they boosted the saturation of the colors a bit. Sometimes it looked maybe a little bit too gray. Like, you could see everything is green and colorful, but I just wish they made it a bit brighter, and maybe it was the screen I saw it on, but I still think in IMAX it should have looked a bit more contrasty, a bit more saturated. And at times it just felt like a bunch of actors sitting in front of a green screen, even though you could see online, like, they built so many practical sets, they filmed so much of this on location. But it's just the way a lot of these modern 2020s movies look like. You know, Gladiator 2 had something similar, which I'll get into with that movie, but I just wish it looked a bit more timeless visually, even though I think the movie itself does have legs to be a kind of modern classic over the next few decades. But I will say this movie, at least part 1, cost about $145 million, and that Oz, great and powerful movie, whatever Sam Raimi made like 10 years ago at this point, cost $70 million more to make. And that's crazy, because that movie looked like garbage. But overall, I really enjoyed Wicked more than I thought I would. I figured I would probably like it, but the more I sit on it, the more I actually really like it. This thing is going to make a ridiculous amount of money. I mean, I'm filming this on the Saturday of opening weekend, so we don't really have the exact estimates. From what I saw online, they're predicting about 117 million. I think it's probably going to be bigger than that. I think closer to 125, $130 million domestic opening weekend. The word of mouth of this is going to be crazy. The rewatchability of this is going to be crazy. I know my girlfriend wants me to go with her already a second time, and I know they're adding in December these sing-along screenings. That is all pure printing money for the studio. You have Thanksgiving coming up here in the States, so kids are going to have off. I mean, you have Christmas time coming up. There's a lot of opportunity for this movie to make a lot of money, and I love when any movie makes a lot of money. It really helps out the entire industry. If it doesn't make $1 billion, I think it'll be pretty damn close to like 800 or 900 million total worldwide. The only reason I think it might not hit $1 billion is because Moana 2 is coming out. That's going to take a lot of families that would maybe see Wicked. A lot of the people that have younger kids will probably end up going to Moana 2 once or twice, but Wicked is going to be a smash hit. And if part 1 doesn't make $1 billion and it just misses, you could bet your ass that part 2 is going to make $1 billion plus. I think it's a very enjoyable movie. I think it's something that pretty much anybody could enjoy. It's the perfect family movie for Thanksgiving weekend. I think anybody that was on the fence of seeing this, maybe they thought, Broadway musical adaptation, how good could it really be? It seems like the Wicked fans are already big fans, and I think they're going to start bringing everybody that's a bit on the fence to the movie theater. Like my friend just went with his girlfriend and he was like, oh, you know what, Wicked, it's pretty good. So even though Wicked might not make my personal top 10 movies of the rest of the year, you could bet your ass a lot of people are already loving this movie. It's going to be a favorite for a lot of people. Everyone that loves musical theater is going to go out in droves multiple times for this. And all I can hope for is that I enjoyed part 2 just as much, if not more, than part 1 a year from now. Thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate you as always. This is all of my social media right here, but Letterboxd is the one I check the most. So if you want to follow me on that and keep up with what I'm watching, be sure to follow me there. I want to shout out to Reed again for helping me edit. Right now, my life has been crazy the past 3 months and probably another couple weeks, and he has really helped me out a ton with the YouTube stuff. So thank you again, Reed. This is all of his stuff here. If you are somebody that needs help with editing, be sure to hit him up. And I'm sure if you made it to this part of the video, he did a good job because you're still watching the video. So be sure to hit him up for that. Be sure to like the video. It really helps out the algorithm a lot more than you think. It helps me get paid so I can pay Reed to help with the videos every once in a while. So that just helps both of us out, and I'd really appreciate that. Be sure to subscribe if you really like the video though, because we are putting out multiple videos, not just about Wicked and Wicked Part 2 next year, but I talk about as many movies as I possibly can over here. Like I mentioned, if you're interested in my thoughts on Gladiator 2, it's pretty bad, but if you want to watch my review, that will be coming pretty soon. And be sure to comment down below, what did you think of Wicked? If you didn't like it, I really want to hear why. I haven't really heard many negatives about this movie so far, and I would really like to know why you feel that way. If you loved the movie, what was your favorite part? Do you think there is a better song and sequence than Defying Gravity? I would love to hear it in the comment section down below. And if you like this video and you want to see more, YouTube thinks you are going to like this video a lot more, so be sure to click on one of these two right here. And yeah, I really appreciate it if you enjoy one of those videos. So this is Chase. Thank you so much for watching as always, and I hope you have an awesome day. Thanks.